Good to go.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of The VUU. I am Christina Rivera, and we are your hosts for The VUU, which is the Church of the Larger Fellowship's weekly talk show. Weekly being weekly from like September-ish through GA-ish talk show where we talk about current events and things that are going on both within Unitarian Universalist universe and outside our sphere, but always through the lens of Unitarian Universalism. So I'm delighted to join you today from beautiful Augusta County, Virginia, where we are fully into spring. It is gorgeous outside, and it's just like everything is blooming, everything's wonderful, and I'm a little afraid of the allergies that I know are just gonna be hitting soon. Aisha, how you doing?
Hi, I'm Aisha Hauser, and I'm in Seattle, Washington. It's gray, and it's the usual Seattle spring, which every now and then we get teased with some sun, which is then everybody's out. I mean, everybody's out all the time anyway here, so it's pretty moderate all year. But I did buy tulips. It's tulip season here in Seattle, and in the Pacific Northwest, maybe the whole country. I don't know anything about flowers. I don't grow things. My poor neighbor was moving and texted me, "Can you take my plants for a week?" I said, "They will die." So no, I'm not. I'm saying this for you, because if you give them to me, and I'll feel sad and then guilty and have to buy new plants. So I'm just circumventing all of that and saying no. So I buy fresh flowers and put them in vases. I am very successful at that. So I bought tulips yesterday, purple and yellow. So they're making me happy. That's me. Michael.
Hi, everyone. Michael Tino joining you from Peekskill, New York, in the lovely Hudson Valley of New York, where it is like an absolutely perfect, bright, sunny 60-something degrees spring day, and the lilacs are blooming here, and I've got windows open by both lilac bushes so that the scent can come in the house. But boy, howdy, you were talking about pollen and allergies, and I've had the last 2 mornings pollen coating my car, which happens in the South. I lived in North Carolina for 15 years. There's yellow season, but it is not something I'm used to in New York, tree pollen all over the cars. So it is a heck of an allergy season here. But my windows are still open because I don't care, because the scent of the lilacs in the house is just wonderful. I had the great pleasure of actually meeting a colleague, former CLF Learning Fellow Kimberly Debus, for lunch yesterday. And we actually hugged one another. It was so marvelous, and it was the first time I've eaten in a restaurant, inside a restaurant, since last March, which was a little freaky, but the restaurant was very distanced. They actually had these hedges between, like these potted evergreen hedges between the tables to keep the tables at least 6 feet apart. And they sat us by an open window, and it was really a marvelous thing. And I'm very nervous about things feeling too normal, both because I don't really want things to be the way they were, and because I'm nervous. So that's what's going on here. Tanner Linden is behind our chalice today. Are you saying hi today, Tanner?
No pressure. There he is.
Sure. Why not? Hi, I'm Tanner Linden. I do tech for The VUU, so I will be taking your comments from YouTube and dropping them in the chat. Darby just commented. Hi, Darby. So please comment any questions, comments, concerns, anything, and I'll make sure the hosts see it.
Thanks, Tanner. Thanks for always taking care of us and taking care of our faithful real-time live watchers. We always appreciate you all, and we also appreciate folks who pick up the VUU afterwards. You can check us out on YouTube after, if you don't happen to make it here at noon Eastern, 9 Pacific, let's say 11 Central, I think is what we're going to go for. I've taken now to, when I'm doing online trainings, to not naming the hour, but naming the minutes after the hour, because then I don't have to do the math. So I will say, we'll be back at 15 after the hour. And then whatever hour you're at, you just get to make it up because it's much better than me trying to do the math.
And you just hope that you don't have anyone in your training from Newfoundland.
Yeah, that's it.
which is on a half an hour.
What is with that? Like the half hour, like really, we've got enough. Aren't we dealing with enough with the daylight savings and the time zones and everything?
I didn't even know that. I was today years old when I learned that Newfoundland has different time than the rest of the globe. Is that what you're telling me?
They are in a half an hour time zone.
Oh,
Yeah.
Lord help us. All right. Yeah, I believe you. It's like Chris said, maybe it's because it's the pandemic. Maybe I would be more open to Newfoundland's time.
I don't know.
I believe India is also on a half an hour time zone.
Huh, so. Well, maybe they're saying that about us then,
That's right.
There's people over there on the top of the hour. Like what is with them? There's some talk show podcast going on right now in Newfoundland and in India, and they're just roasting us as they should. It's
I love
okay.
that. It's true. You know it, right? That's true. It's true.
It's okay. So today we will start, as we always do, with our UU Roundup. And I just want to give a shout out to all of the congregations that are calling their ordained clergy. It is super exciting to see. I know it's really hard to call somebody during, a pandemic. The three of us were called to the CLF during the pandemic, but the CLF is used to being virtual and global. And it's different for bricks and mortar congregations. So shout out to all of you that are doing the work and doing it faithfully. Thank you all for that very special ministry. Michael, you have any UU Roundup?
Sure. So those of you who are preparing to go to General Assembly or talking within your congregations about the delegates who will be attending virtual General Assembly might have figured out or noticed that there is a contested election on the ballot. One of the board elections has a petition candidate running for it. And, I just want to say that I know Sam Trumbor, who is the nominating committee candidate for that. The Reverend Sam Trumbor has served our congregation in Albany, Albany, New York, for quite a while now. And he is a superbly justice-centered, committed to anti-racism and anti-racist work, mindful leader. He has led the UU Buddhist Network for many years. He was actually one of the people who worked very hard on the open UUA process to help get more transparency in our national leadership. So to actually have him on the board, I think will help us move forward in that transparency work. And so I just, without getting into the candidate, the race too much or why it's happening, I just want to say that I have endorsed Sam for that position, and I know many people that I know and trust have also endorsed Sam, and I hope that you, if you are a delegate to General Assembly, will vote for him.
Yeah, and to just follow up on that, what I really like about Sam is his willingness to be curious, and his ability to both lead and follow, to be a worshipful follower when necessary, but also is willing to take the risks that are necessary in order to lead. And that, to me, when I'm looking at colleagues who I can work with and who I can respect and trust. Doing UUA leadership, that's something about Sam that really speaks to me, and makes, when I heard that he was nominated, was thrilled, and I'm really excited for what he will bring to, what all of the nominees will bring to the UUA Board of Trustees.
And I also want, and I don't know Sam as well as you both, so I want to say that I trust the UUA nominating committee. I was on it. I was chair at one point, and so I know the process and how diligent the group is. And so I want to I'm also going to endorse Sam, both based on what you both have said and trusting the nominating committee. And I believe Jakaran Olaoya and Reverend Elizabeth Mount are the two other people nominated by the UUA nominating committee. And there is a process of vetting, of applications, of what is important for the UUA, who is important to have, who will, like just what you said, Chris and Michael, move the UUA forward in a way that centers liberation and centers people and care for community.
Yeah, I think it's important. Thank you, Aisha, for bringing that nominating committee part into this, because one of the roles of the nominating committee, similar to, that you would see in any, of your church organizations, is that vetting part, which is really important, talking to references, doing background checks, making sure that the skills and talents of the board is balanced, that the makeup of the board is balanced, from a gender, trans inclusion, race and ethnicity, age, kind of, not that we want people representing a particular population, but we want them to bring a lens to the board that is helpful when looking at all of the different issues that the board is dealing with. And so that role of the nominating committee is really, really important. And I'll link back to the idea of the democratic process, because some folks say, well, how can it be a democratic process unless there's, a competition? And the democratic process is not synonymous with competition, right? Like, that is not what makes it democratic. And in this process, we also vote for the nominating committee. So you have a say about who is on those that committee that then, does that work. And they do a lot of work. Like, they spend a lot of hours and time, and these are all volunteers. So there is, a process by which we all have a say as to how that process is being carried out. And so I definitely just wanted to lift up that there are lots of different ways of being democratic, and that's just one of them.
I also want to make a note of the folks in the chat who are lifting up the transitions of saying goodbye to one. Lucretia Williams says, as a new UU, it's been interesting to watch our congregation say goodbye to our settled minister of 18-ish years and start on the road for a new one. Oh, thank you, Darby. As someone who has applied for delegate credentials for the CLF, I'm appreciative for this conversation and insight. And then Darby also said, watching my husband help his congregation go through a difficult search while maintaining boundaries to not get involved is almost impossible. That is true, right? Grace for all. I want to, can I, if I may, one of the things I've been hearing is the three of us are part of a collaborative team, obviously to lead the the UUA's largest congregation. And one of the things that I've heard through colleagues is that some of our colleagues, some ordained ministers, are telling their search committees not to support a collaborative leadership model because some ministers don't like it. And I want to offer a prayer of hope that is not a universal truth, because to me, I'm not clear on how setting up really what amounts to dictatorships in congregations, how that served us at all. How has that served us? Now, when people throw around the term ministerial authority, I always invite people to ask more questions about what we're talking about. So I would actually love to delve into that a little bit, because I think there's a misunderstanding between what it means to have ministerial authority and, like I said, basically what amounts to a dictatorship or CEO, because I don't think it's healthy. I think a solid minister who is self-differentiated and knows who they are will already move into their authority without having to constantly battle with a board of trustees about ministerial authority. So I've been actually kind of disappointed every time I hear that, because I've heard it more than once in places where, let's say, there's an intern, not an intern, what's the interim or developmental minister, where there was a collaborative model, and then somebody will say, oh no, the ministers don't want this. And I don't, first of all, I don't think that's necessarily true to make that blanket statement. But if it is true, I'd love to hear from the both of you, the pros and cons. I mean, I don't know what the pro is of a dictatorship, but I'm sure somebody can come up with one. And I know it sounds like I'm being hyperbolic, but being in this system, having worked in a system where when asked why something's happening that isn't helping the congregation, the answer is because the minister wants that. Really, is that, and it doesn't, there's no follow-up of what that means. So I'm going to stop there and get your.
Yeah, I think that I think one of the things I'll lift out of what you said is this idea that that all ministers don't like that, right? And so there is no all ministers, right? Like, let's just start there. There is no thing that all ministers are or do or be. And so I think that there are some ministers who are ideally suited to a CEO, nonprofit organization, corporate structure model of governance and staff supervision in the congregations that they serve. And there are highly collaborative folks who want to do shared ministry, want to look beyond the structures that are already in place and dream and be curious and create that which is not already in existence. And to say that all of them either want something or don't want something is just so heavy-handed and so not what we're striving to be as Unitarian Universalists. I think that part alone should probably make people curious about where that's coming from and how that's being portrayed. Because I think as we talk about the evolution of Unitarian Universalism in our polity and our theology, I think that we want folks who can be curious, can be collaborative, can be, thinking of the next thing that will help get us free, not thinking about, the structures that have always been in place and how can we possibly just tweak those a little bit and all of a sudden we'll have liberation. That's really not going to get it. I mean, I think that we've shown that over and over again, that we really do need to build new structures to take us into liberation. So, Michael, what do you think?
Well, I can speak for myself as a minister who has for years dreamed of being on a collaborative leadership team, and now I am, yay! And the last year has borne out why I dreamed about that. And when I say I dreamed about it, literally I had dreams and would wake up and tell a colleague, I had a dream that you and I were a co-ministry team. And here's how it worked. And they were like, oh, wow, if that ever comes to pass, let me know. I mean, I really did dream about it. And I think that, when I talk about ministerial authority, I talk about something that is relational and that is built in relation. And, there are some, I think we also have to name that there are some congregations whose trust has been broken so many times by ministers and other professionals that have abused that trust. And it takes a lot for them to trust a minister or another professional with authority. And so there are a lot of places where even a minister who wants to be collaborative with a board can't engage in that collaboration because, and I think often it's because that congregation has suffered misconduct in the past, and so they're not willing to or able to trust a minister right away. I serve a bricks and mortar congregation that was like that. And I didn't even know until 10 years into my ministry that one of my colleagues in years past misconducted in this congregation, and then everything made sense. But even when I first started there and lacking a formal collaborative structure, I approach ministry as I am not the expert in the room on everything, right? Like I have my expertise and other people bring their expertise into the room. So when I work with, for example, a professional religious educator, even if we don't have a formal collaborative leadership structure, which I love and want to encourage congregations to adopt, I understand that I'm working with someone with expertise in education, right? In child development, in youth development, in curriculum development, in faith development, and like I took a couple classes in that, so I know something about it. I was the chair of a congregation's religious education committee when I felt called to the ministry, so like I know something about it, but it is not my area of greatest expertise. And so I have to say, you know, somebody else gets to be the expert when we're talking about that. And that's not any I think it's part of white supremacy culture that one person is expected to be the expert on everything, or that a minister would consider it a slight against them if somebody else in the room has more expertise than they do. I think we have to get past that.
We do have to get past. I want to ask you something, Michael, because one of the things that has come up over and over, and it's something that actually breaks my heart. I know that there are congregations that don't bring their best selves. I get that. And thank you for naming that, most of the time something happened. What happened? Some trauma happened somewhere along the line. So then the congregation builds all kinds of policies and whatnot, rules and in the search process to protect themselves. So then ministers come in and are told to protect themselves from it. So everyone's like in this protection mode. And one of the things that I've been wondering for a while, and I said this when the Commission on Institutional Change brought together 30 people, I wondered out loud, so how, this is genuinely a wondering, like, where's the repair? Because my thing is this, we're in helping professions, right? And and I did not go through the ministerial process. I went through social work, where I knew I was going to go into systems to help people who are, not, I don't know. I knew social work what I was expecting, but it feels like some of our ministerial colleagues, I don't know. Did you think you were going to go into a congregation and just do weddings and funerals and not realize that people are, many are broken for a lot of compelling reasons and going through trauma. And so, yes, there's this, when you get more than two people together, isn't there dysfunction anyway of some sort? I mean, I don't know. My point is, how do we as a faith know that we have much more grace with each other, and the response not be to double down on, I'm doing this because I said so and I'm the minister? Because I've had that. Michael, I've worked for ministers that haven't been their best selves with me. I've been yelled at. Anyway, I say that because I didn't yell back because I knew it would ruin my career. It would ruin my career if I yelled back at a minister. I would not be here right now. So I guess my bigger question before I went on 9 tangents is, where is the invitation to repair this, what feels like an existential challenge of ministers are coming in armed and congregations are armed? Is that making sense, Michael?
It makes a whole lot of sense, and I wouldn't be 14 years into a ministry at the bricks and mortar congregation I serve if repair wasn't possible, right? I wouldn't, I would have left a long time ago. So, I think that repair is possible, but part of the way you repair that broken trust in a system is by naming it, right? So repair is not possible if nobody is owning up to the fact that the system is broken and why, right? So, it's like dismantling white supremacy. If we don't say this is white supremacy culture in action, we can't even start to dismantle it. If we're in denial over the fact that it exists, we can't start to dismantle it. Or if we're just not wise to the fact because we're so steeped in our own privilege that we can't start to dismantle it. And it's the same thing with those relationships. And so, 10 years into my ministry, I had an intern who misconducted and had to be removed, and the congregation had to be told why. And we engaged Deborah Pope Lance, who is the UUA's great consultant on ministerial misconduct and after pastor situations, and she was amazed that the congregation was so forthright about this. She's like, this doesn't happen in after pastor congregations, and yours is one. Right? This doesn't happen in congregations where the trust has been violated unless there's been a whole lot of healing. So we had to say at the beginning of my ministry, how do you learn to trust a minister? Right? How is it that you're going to learn to trust me? So what do I need to do as a minister to earn your trust when that is going to be hard because you've been systemically in the system has been burned before. And it took a while, right? It took me acting with the most integrity that I could muster for as long as I could. 'Cause that's what we're called to do. But it happened, and then we were suddenly able to say, oh, ministers are not trained to abuse their people. So it's not like I have to automatically mistrust ministers. Ministers are not trained to abuse their staff. Ministers are not trained to be jerks to the religious educators they work with, right? No, that's not our training. That is not our training. In fact, it is not. It just happens to be how some people act. And it happens to be a way of acting that our culture reinforces and gives people credit for. So it took but the healing had to start with, oh, you have trouble trusting. I wonder why that is. Let's talk about that. Right? And it took 10 years to get to, oh yeah, a minister misconducted here 30 years ago or 40 years ago or whatever it was. It took 10 years to get to I'm like, okay, good. We understand why these things happen now. And so the next minister who serves that congregation, when I one day leave it, won't have to start from step one, square A.
Thank you. It's important because it impacts a lot of people who maybe would join our congregations but show up and then there's like, oh, but you know the story.
Well, and sadly, all of this trauma and bad behavior is not sealed in the past, right? So there are ministers doing these things right now to their congregations. And so there's an ongoing, like every time a congregation is healed, they have to go through the healing again. It's sad.
It is, and it's, I think it's the idea that somehow churches are a different place than the wider world. So often that kind of, we have folks come into our congregations thinking that somehow this place is going to be different than the wider world, and are disappointed when they're a reflection of the wider world. And I think, how we care for people during that transition, during that faith formation and that faith development is crucial. And it's crucial, that we have religious educators that are trained, and we have ministers, ordained clergy people that are trained in how to speak to the trauma and still provide, the hope for what we can become. Because so often, we have folks that come in and they're making that transition, and they're just, they're like, oh, I can't believe this is terrible. Just like it is out there in the world. And we're like, yeah. And once we acknowledge that, then we can move on and move forward towards working for liberation. But we can't do that if we're not acknowledging that we are not the end all be all. And anybody who says that we are, is really not looking at our faith and theology very closely. So I think that it has to be a both and. We see that a lot in our youth programming, where our youth are so excited about. They learn so much about the theology, the liberative theology of Unitarian Universalism as they're growing up, and as they come into their youth and young adulthood. They also see the parts of our practice of that theology that do not live up to our highest ideals. And that's really a hard thing to face. It's, when you're learning that about the world and about your faith community at the same time, that's hard. So if we think about it from that point of view, also, we have to have that faith development, both of people who are coming in and of our folks who have been lifelong UUs, because I think sometimes we forget about them, that they're having that same conflict of two different realities coming to collide.
So if we can pivot, I wanted to bring up Colombia. Okay, so I lived in Colombia, South America, and we the CLF had hired a minister, Reverend Jorge Espinal, who lives in Cali, Colombia. And right now, Colombia is in the midst of, it hasn't been called an uprising, or maybe it has, but it is basically, I have here when I lived there for 2 years, my little Colombian souvenirs. The president, Duque, I think that's how you say his name, had tried to impose just severe taxes that would have impacted disproportionately the middle class and folks who can't afford to pay higher taxes in an already deeply unequal society in terms of wealth distribution. One of the things that's happening is the police and military have been given carte blanche to basically murder protesters, to kill them. What folks, I don't think many know, is how much, it's the second largest embassy, I believe second or third largest embassy in the world. We have the United States has an enormous presence in Colombia. That's how I was there. My ex-husband worked for the State Department. So what's happening in Colombia is there's no way it's not being influenced by the United States. And there's remnants of what's happening right now in Colombia we need to pay attention to, because people are just being murdered with impunity by the state. But there's remnants of it here. I just woke up to see that a Trump-appointed judge said that the CDC overreached in putting a moratorium on evictions. So lifting that moratorium will disproportionately in the United States impact Black and brown people. So this, and it's, you know, talk about sowing the seeds of revolution. It's like, what is it? I mean, we're still in a global pandemic. And so thousands and thousands of people are in the street in Colombia. That's going to happen again here. And it's going to be because people can't live. And none of this is sustainable, to have this much income inequality, to have the state, you know, have a heavy hand. So I wanted to lift that up, and our hearts go out to our siblings in spirit in Colombia. Reverend Jorge, his sister works for Meadville Lombard, Claudia. So just wanted to lift that up and pay, you know, because we don't, as people in the US, unless we are intentional about our news sources, we don't know. I mean, because I live there, I have close friends who are in Colombia, and we have religious educators and ministers who are Colombian. So I wanted to name that.
Yeah, and to name the way that U.S. foreign policy has played a role in Central and South America cannot be overstated, and is something that a lot of people don't even know. They just have no idea what the U.S. has done to Central and South America over the years, and continues to do. Like, you know, a lot of people are like, oh, that, you know, happened back in the 80s, 90s, you know, 70s, 80s. No, we're still doing it. You know, there is still a push and pull on immigration that is a direct result of our foreign policy in those areas, and a foreign policy that is almost exclusively driven by what, quote unquote, benefits the U.S. And so, you know, I think that to you know, if we were to take responsibility for that policy in those countries in a way that actually decentered the U.S. and recentered those countries as, you know, reparation for what we had, the harm that we've imposed for centuries, that would even be a beginning if we just started thinking about it that way. As opposed to what we hear a lot in our media, which is the results of those the negative, quote unquote, negative results of that foreign policy.
It's interesting. Thank you for telling us that story of Colombia, Aisha. Because you're right, I haven't seen a thing about it, and I try my best to pay attention to international news. You know, I try to listen to the BBC World News in the morning, which is more international than most US news sources. I won't call them American out of respect for my other most US news sources. And I haven't heard about Colombia. I know lots about the Scottish elections today from the BBC. Thank you. But those are like elections happening. Those are not people being murdered in the streets and mass uprisings happening in a country that's very close by. And let's be clear, the Monroe Doctrine dates to the early 19th century, right? The United States has declared itself basically the imperial power for all of North and South America in 1823, and has been messing stuff up since.
Yeah, and thank you, Michael, for pointing out that whole America thing, because I know a lot of folks in the U.S. don't understand why. Like, I very rarely refer to America. I'm almost always in writing or speaking refer to the U.S., when I mean the United States of America, because the entire North and South America are actually America. And it really ticks the rest of the Americas off when the U.S. positions itself as the America. And so I appreciate being able to just let people know within the sound of my voice, if you all can say the U.S. when you mean the U.S. and the Americas when you mean the Americas, that would make just millions of people really, really happy.
Oh, I was corrected in Colombia. When I said something about being American, a Colombian woman said to me, "We're all American. You're from the U.S." Like, you're absolutely. And since then, I learned my lesson. That's right.
Well, those who are Facebook friends with me know that I've been undertaking learning Spanish, and I do a weekly conversational Spanish class, and it was week 1 of Spanish class, and our instructor made it very clear that if we, the class, wanted to piss off a whole lot of native Spanish speakers, we would say Soy Americano when we meant Soy Estadounidense. So I'm like, all right, lesson learned, week 1. Okay.
It's verdad.
That is so true. It is like immediately, what are you talking about? Who are we centering here? Aisha asked if I wanted to talk about Puerto Rico vying for statehood, along with Washington, D.C., right? So I think that it's so funny because I try really hard not to talk about Puerto Rico as a state, and it's whether or not it wants to become a state, because it is such a deeply, deeply divisive issue in Puerto Rico. And I feel like as a Puerto Riqueña from the mainland, which is what we call the contiguous states in Puerto Rico, I have probably the least voice in this, right? that should be heard about it. So, but what I will say is that Puerto Rico has been a territory of one or another colonizing nation for, centuries. And if it were to become a state, and there's lots of Puerto Ricanos that want that. There's probably slightly over half that want that. It would provide economic benefits and representational benefits that can't be overstated. It's ridiculous that all of these U.S. citizens are on an island and they can't vote in an election unless they fly to the United States and land and get residency somewhere, and then they can, because they're citizens, they can vote. So that in itself is just like completely ridiculous. If I had a perfect solution, because people ask that, they're like, well, if you don't want statehood, what do you want? Then you should just get out and not be a territory and not get the support of the U.S. government. And my response to that is the U.S. government has systematically sucked dry Puerto Rico over decades. They have had pharmaceutical companies there because they could experiment on people, because it was outside of U.S. law and U.S. regulations. They've had, stripped it bare for sugar plantations. Like it has just looked at Puerto Rico as, what can we get out of this little resource island that we have? So if Puerto Rico was to become truly independent, what that would look like is the U.S. giving back every single resource dollar that it has sucked dry out of that island over the time that it has been a territory, in order that the country of Puerto Rico could be self-sufficient and could be self-determining. And so that's why we're in this territory state, because the U.S. won't, shit or get off the pot. And it's it's just terrifying what that means for the people of Puerto Rico. It's
I had no idea it was divisive. That's
oh gosh, yes.
this is my ignorance. I had no idea. I actually, and I don't even know what assumptions I made, but I did not realize, thank you for naming that. I had no idea that it was a deeply divisive topic.
It is a deeply divisive topic. They have a referendum every few years, like every 3 or 4 years. Some politician says, we should have a referendum and vote on the island as to whether or not we want statehood. And every few years, the vote tips a little bit more towards statehood. I think the last couple of years, it's been like 55%. It keeps growing. But that has a lot to do with the economic status of Puerto Rico and the poverty that people are living in, and the knowledge that at least if they got statehood, that it's likely that poverty would ease just a bit.
Well, as I understand it, there are at least 3 options, right? There's statehood, there's independence as an independent nation, and then there's this status quo territory.
Correct.
Status. And I heard a wonderful set of interviews not too long ago with some folks in Puerto Rico who were making the case that any actual decision by the people of Puerto Rico has to start with American reparations.
Exactly.
For the centuries now of imperialist extractive policies, and that once those reparations have happened, then the people can decide, do we want to be a state, do we want to be independent?
Because it's hard to make a decision when somebody's foot is on your neck, right? Like, do you want to survive? Yes we do, thank you very much. And so it is deeply divisive, and it's very painful. It is very, very painful topic to Puerto Ricanos because of that division and because of the way it's just been savaged. I don't want to use that word. It's just been, as you said, extracted in over and over and over again, and without any thought as to what it's doing to the people of Puerto Rico. So it's a thing for sure. And I mean, the people of DC, Washington DC have a lot of that same, how, and they're even more so like, how on earth could we not have, this population of folks have actual representation in their government? It just boggles the mind.
Baffling one, DC. But it isn't baffling now because it would, now there's a concerted effort to keep DC from becoming a state because of most likely who the representatives would be. And so it's so blatant.
It'd be the first state that was majority people of color.
Yeah, that's right. Right. That's exactly right.
And as with Puerto Rico and Puerto Rico, what the really interesting part of this is like, so the people of Puerto Rico can vote, the people of DC can vote as to if they came up and said, yes, we want to be states, that's all they can say, right? So it's not like it's automatic. It's not like the U.S. Congress will immediately take it up. They don't have to. They can just sit back and, Congress actually has to be the one that moves that forward. It doesn't matter what DC or Puerto Rico actually say.
To be clear, the House of Representatives has passed the bill.
Yes.
To carve out a state from, and DC statehood is complicated because the Constitution requires a federal district that is not a state, but to carve out the federal district as being the buildings that nobody lives in, right, and have the rest of it be a state. House of Representatives has passed that. Is it going to pass the Senate? No, it's not. It's not going to pass the Senate because it adds 2 senators to the Senate. Let's just be clear.
They need more than, and I am admitting ignorance to what. So it's not just a simple majority. Does it need 2/3 of the Senate?
Oh, no, it needs 50 votes plus the vice president, but it needs to actually get up for a vote, which
Oh, they're filibustering the filibuster.
they'll
Which
filibuster.
screw the Democrats won't get rid of it either. That's why Democrats suck too. Sorry. I mean, give me, they won't get rid of it because, oh, they may need it. And I'm like, but now you're setting yourselves up. We're all like, this is, they don't get
Yep.
I'm
And Puerto Rican statehood is much more complicated because it's, the people of Puerto Rico haven't formally asked for it. So if Congress were to pass that, it'd be yet another imperialist move by the United States. But
yeah, and I'm not 100% certain that it hasn't been brought to Congress in the past, but I know right now the idea is really, no statehood before reparations. That it's not willing to automatically be the poorest state in the United States, without acknowledgement of the contributions that it has made to the U.S. In its history. Yeah, we're everywhere today. We're in UU politics, we're in US politics, we're in global politics, we're in all of the places. And in all of the places that we've just named, Unitarian Universalists, right? So we have a Unitarian Universalist church in Puerto Rico. There's a group of UUs who meet in San Juan. And as it's just fascinating the way U.S. Politics track with UUA politics. So a very talented UU minister not many years ago put a proposal before the UUA for the UUA to sponsor the paid ministry of ordained clergy person at that congregation in Puerto Rico, because it's lay-led, it doesn't have funds, so this minister was willing to go to Puerto Rico and be their minister. They were excited about having this person, and they put this proposal to the UUA, and the UUA said no thanks. We don't want to make that investment. So it's really fascinating to see how the two track really closely together.
I always say Unitarian Universalism never misses an opportunity to miss an opportunity. So
yep. So it is, like we said, we are a reflection of the world. We are not separate from it. We are a reflection of it. And so that's why it behooves us to work for liberation, because if we're a reflection of liberation within our congregations, then, and we're reflecting that out to the world, then maybe we might be getting liberated in the world.
Amen.
We can do it, folks. We can do it.
And get vaccinated. Enough people aren't getting vaccinated. What do I get vaccinated? That's all I'm gonna say, because that's another upsetting topic. I had no idea how few people are getting vaccinated.
If you can.
If you can, and too many who can aren't.
Yes,
and
no, I agree. I just want to acknowledge.
No, you're right. Absolutely.
That there are people out there, and organ transplant recipients, and people with immune conditions.
Absolutely.
And anyone under 16.
Right. And that's why everybody who needs to. Because here's the thing I want to tell our siblings in spirit. Because I've seen, we're very quick on Facebook to look down our nose on whatever we consider on the right. But this is also a liberal problem, because there are those anti-vaxxers who consider themselves, liberal. Now I feel like these words are meaningless now, because if you're not caring for community, you can put whatever label you want on yourself. You're not caring for community. So if you are able, thank you, Michael, you're right. If you are able to get vaccinated, please get vaccinated.
And please get your second vaccination. There's lots of folks that are not getting your second vaccination. You need both, people. We need both. And we need you to get, if you can't get vaccinated, we need you to get vaccinated. And if you were doing a survey of your bricks and mortar congregation and giving a percentage about how much of your congregation is vaccinated or will be by a certain date, and you are not counting the children in your congregation, you do not have a percentage. You just have a number. That is not, if you are not counting your children in your congregation as people, you got a bigger problem.
There is something wrong. There is something wrong there. Let's just
open it up. There's something wrong with there's something wrong with the math. There's something wrong with your faith practice. We need to be thinking about the children in our congregations and how opening will be affecting them. And I don't care what is going on in your local schools. Your local schools are an economy, and they are making an economic decision as to what is best for them. That is not a decision that you need to bring into your congregations. You need to be making a conversation and a decision based on our faith values. And those faith values say that we have radical hospitality, which means that we will not gather until we can all gather. And I say it again, we will not gather until we can all gather, right? So make good choices, people. I tell my boys that when they leave the house. I tell them, remember who you are, whose you are, where you come from, and make good choices.
Amen.
Amen.
Well, with that, we will leave you today, and we will see you again next week on The View. Take care, folks.